Hey there, Dave Paulides, Canammissing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And I'm back in the silo. We've had a long run in here, I'm sorry about that, but it seems like every day I'm about ready to go out and do some filming, something comes up, wind, rain, snow, smoke. We just had some snow here the other day, first of the season, so grateful for that. One thing that has come up as of late is people ask me questions about being a policeman and what it was like and a variety of other things. I don't talk too much about it, but everyone out here in our village, if you run into a traffic accident as you're driving down the highway and you see some people laying on the ground and they're bleeding and they're screaming and they're in excruciating pain, you're going to take something away from that scene when you go home that night. You may not even be directly involved, but you're going to take something home. You're going to remember that. Myself and the crew that was filming the last movie, we were driving through Idaho. And it was a lonely stretch of 4-lane highway. And maybe a half an hour before, a group of motorcyclists passed us. And these weren't gangs. This was an older group of riders. And we were going the speed limit on the right side. They passed us going a little faster. And about an hour and a half later, we come up on them. And there's about 50 of them, and they're pulled to the side of the road. And in the middle of the slow right lane, there's a body laying there dead. And blood's everywhere. And all of the bike riders are off to the side just staring. Nobody's around the body. And they put a couple bikes before the body to slow people around and meander them around. And there were no emergency services left at the scene. It was obvious it was a deceased person. It was mangled pretty bad. And I remember that the people I was with that day in our car that were part of the crew, some of these people were pretty young and they'd never seen anything like that. And we talked about it for a good couple days. Seeing that really resonates inside of some people. Now, when I became a policeman, I just knew I had some ability to compartmentalize tragic events and kind of put them in a box and reflect on them later and not have them affect me in that immediate nature. And I don't know where I ever got that ability, but I did have it. The one thing I could not deal with was young kids. And there were several cases of young kids that were involved in brutal accidents, drowned, things like that. At one time I had to ask a couple other officers, hey, you guys take care of this, I got to get away from this. And I walked away from it. And I had nightmares about it for a couple days. But then other times in San Jose, I went to shootings all the time on the east side of the city. And I don't know why. That never bothered me. Seeing an old man who died in his home at 80 years old, dead in a rocker, didn't bother me. But there's an accumulation of this in your system. And I knew probably about my 7th or 8th year that I was going to do 20 years and that I was going to leave. I just knew it. It didn't matter the reason, I was leaving. And I kind of set myself up because I started going back to school, getting an advanced degree, and I knew I don't think it's that I couldn't take it anymore. I think a lot of it had to do with the way life was moving. You could talk, once you get the trust, I mean serious trust of law enforcement people, almost all of them will tell you, I'm being serious about this, that the stress from the job, 95% of it doesn't come from you people out there. 99% of you are really great to us. It's a very small fraction of 1% that is not polite or angry. But the real stress from policing comes from within. It's our own administrators. It's the people who run the departments. And why is that? When I was a policeman, there was a core group. So there were 1,400 people in our department. And there was a core group of probably 50 out of the 1,400 that were seriously great officers that understood how to work informants, understood the law inside and out, understood how to write a search warrant, how to write an arrest warrant, etc. Not many officers do that kind of stuff. Surprisingly, you probably think they all do. A very small percentage. And then there's a very small percentage of police officers that took the job for one reason. They wanted to be a police chief. I never wanted to be a sergeant, a lieutenant. I never wanted to be in the administration. I never took a promotional exam. And why? Because I knew that that wasn't the job I wanted to do. I didn't want to sit there as a sergeant and judge younger officers. I didn't want to be a police chief and answer to others who had no idea what our job was about, namely public administrators. Because once you get up there into the higher realms of police work, you're no longer doing anything related to policing. It's all politics. It's not what I wanted to do. And it was really hard, very hard, to respect those people at the top that really never spent a percentage of their career doing serious policing. And there were times when I went in to see the chief or see one of the deputy chiefs about an issue, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Talking about informants, talking about a search warrant and the facets of it. They didn't even know what I was talking about. I could tell by the look on their face. And they would ask me questions that, in my mind, I'm thinking, you don't know about this? You don't know how that works? Very hard to respect those people. I did. I was always very polite. But I also knew every time I went in, I came out saying, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want anything to do with that. I refined my skills for one reason, to be a better policeman for the public I serve. That's it. I know that there were people. One of the best administrators I ever worked for was a man named Dennis Sorhan, S-O-R-A-H-A-N. Dennis, he's brilliant. And he hired me into the street crimes unit in San Jose. And then he hired me in vice intelligence. And he and I used to talk a lot. And he always said, Dave, I made a mistake. Should have never became a lieutenant. He was making good money, highly respected, but he had to deal with the politics because he was in charge of different units. In all those meetings, I walked out of that office with great respect for him and said, he's not a happy soul. He's not living his dream. And this week, I was given a notice written by the Casper Police Department. And it broke my heart. I'm going to read it to you. In the afternoon hours of September 27th, 2021, the Casper Police Department suffered the unimaginable loss of Lieutenant Daniel Danny Dundas, a 13-year veteran of our agency and a lifelong member of our community. Lieutenant Dundas was a beloved member of our department and for many people was the face of the Casper Police Department, especially when he was at community events. When our citizens thought of what a Casper police officer should be, they thought of Danny. Over the last several days, the police department has been in close contact with the Dundas family during this tragic time to help them in any way we are able and to release the following information to the public. The law enforcement profession is an exceptionally rewarding career. It is also an unfortunate truth that law enforcement professionals are expected by the very communities they serve to respond to experiences and events which normal citizens would rarely or ever be forced to endure. We ask our officers to undergo these traumatic events over and over and over throughout their career. These burdens are tangible, and they impact our officers, the families and loved ones of our officers, and each employee of the department. During his years of service to our community, like all police officers, Lieutenant Dundas had experienced a wide variety of both positive and negative events with citizens, victims, and suspects alike. Although all of our officers are highly trained professionals, they are first and foremost humans. The stoic emotions we steadfastly maintain while on duty often crumble when we return to our homes and loved ones. Lieutenant Dundas had experienced several traumatic events in his career, all of which, individually and collectively, adversely affected him and impacted him in a multitude of ways. An abundance of resources were brought to bear on his behalf, at the department level, through his family, and indeed by he himself. Despite these efforts, our beloved friend, father, son, husband, and community hero took his own life as a direct result of the experiences he had been subjected to while in the service of his community. It is for these reasons the Casper Police Department declares with one unified voice that Lieutenant Dundas' death will be treated by this department as a death incurred as a result of a line of duty action. Though our hearts are broken, we chose to acknowledge the difficult nature of the profession which Danny had, with his characteristic gusto and larger-than-life persona, diligently dedicated himself. This is a tough job. Only the best even attempt to do it. Yet such service to community comes with a cost, oftentimes at a heavy personal cost, and all too frequently, those costs can be extremely steep. The extended Dundas family and his Casper Police Department family share our sincere gratitude to this amazing community for the immense outpouring of support we have received. We are honored and proud to be part of the Casper community. At the wishes of the Dundas family, a public memorial service is scheduled, and all wishing to pay their respects to Danny are invited to attend. The service will be held Monday, October 4th, 2021, at the Ford, Wyoming Center beginning at 4 p.m. The Dundas family asks that attendees wear black and blue or patriotic clothing in honor of Danny's. Procession route information will be shared in the coming days on Facebook. That's Danny Dundas. He gave his life for his community, and the unimaginable loss to his family is beyond recognition. I guarantee it. Now people say, well, Dave, why would you talk about this? Because the police department, the community, all of his friends, his wife, his kids, they're devastated. Nobody saw this coming, I'm sure. And when I told you that COVID is just a smokescreen to what's really happening here in our world, Kitty's death is just a small fraction of the overall picture. But he's the person that we look to for strength and direction at a time of pure horror. I know it's an overused statement when people are running out of hell, like the Twin Towers. It's people like Danny that are running in. So, if you're going to be around Casper, Wyoming on October 4th, I'd for sure go to that. On to the letters. Dear Dave, our hearts go out to you and your family with the loss of your son. It's obvious the love you have for him is very deep and will pull you through this. I hope so. I'm writing to tell you of something that happened back in the summer of '94. We lived in Fresno, California at the time. I was house sitting for a friend who had surgery on her arm and needed someone to take care of her cats and dogs while she was away. Our friend was a widow, whose husband was a truck driver. We had only recently met our friend. Her husband had passed away prior to us getting to know her. It was afternoon, and someone knocked on the door. I opened it, and a man was asking for our friend. I said that she wasn't home at the time and was away. He told me his first name, and at the time didn't think anything, though his first name was the same as her husband. I looked out at the yard, and there was no vehicle. He said he was just there to visit her as he was passing through town, that he was a trucker and had parked his rig around the corner and it wasn't allowed in the residential area we were in. There was only one road in and out of the area, and he had parked on the main road just outside. The house was on the first road in the area off of Blackstone and Ashland behind Mervin's in Fresno. He thanked me for my time and turned to walk away. Once he said he was a trucker and his first name was her husband's, I got the chills. I ran to her room to look at the pic of her husband on her dresser, and it sure looked like him. At that time, there was another knock on the door. I thought he must have come back to talk more or to ask for info. Instead, it was a dear family friend of mine. When I opened the door, she explained, "What is wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." I was shaking a little bit. I said, "Did you see the guy walking away from the yard?" She had to have seen him, as he would have been walking towards the end of the street to go back to his truck. She said no, there was no one on the road. It had just been a few moments for me to close the door, go to her room, look at the pic, and then knock on the door. I explained what had just happened, and we were both just dumbstruck. I didn't tell him that we knew she had cancer again, and she ended up passing away within the next year or two, as I didn't know what his friendship was with her. Plus, I felt if she wanted people to know, she would tell them herself. I didn't tell her that she had a visitor while she was in the hospital. He didn't give his full name, and I didn't ask for it. I still get the chills thinking about that day and wish I had asked him or asked if he was her husband. Thank you for what you do for the village. Looking forward to your next video. So, when Harvey Pratt and Harvey Pratt's a Native American chief, former director of the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation, outstanding individual. Harvey and I were writing the 2 books about Bigfoot, and we were in the Midwest. Harvey had made some contacts with some other Native American chiefs that we were interested in going to some areas where there had been some sightings and things. And this one sighting was near a cemetery. And as we were there and we were talking to some people, some other people came up who were relatives of the chief and told this other chief, "Hey, tell them about the Native American we see here." The chief looked at him, and there's honor amongst chiefs. You never lie to another chief from another tribe. And this person was dressed in a suit, just like a businessman. He was talking to us, and he told Harvey that over the years at this cemetery, people would drive through and they would see a Native American dressed in older traditional garb from the early 1800s. And he was standing on the side of the road. And people would pull up and give this person a ride. And then on the way into town, they'd look over, the person was gone. And apparently this story had gone on many, many, many times. After we were away, I thought, wow, Harvey ought to meet with one of the people that had given this individual a ride and do the drawing on what they look like. It'd be awesome. We never got to that point. But as far as missing 411, I always wondered, so if somebody came up to you while you were on the trail and said, hey, somebody needs help over here, would you help me? And you went with them, and that person turned out to be a ghost and was walking you into hell or walking you into danger, we would never know because that person wasn't here. I'm somebody who's always believed that we are energy. Ghosts are energy. And to not believe, based on the multitude of sightings and evidence, I wouldn't be the first one to step up and say, hey, this isn't happening. But, next story. I'll stop here for a second. Few of you have written and said, hey, just go straight to the stories of the missing people. That's all I'm interested in. I read you these stories for a reason. And maybe you're not wise enough at this point to understand where these stories could lead. But the vast majority of the stories I read to you could lead to answers. I'm not reading them for my health. I'm not reading them to bore you. I'm reading them to see if there's applicability. And each one on their own could lead somewhere where we don't understand. And if your door is so closed that you're unwilling to listen to what I'm reading, then you're probably never going to help this village do anything because your mind is a locked safe. Okay, Dave, I really enjoy watching your videos. I appreciate your delivery style and above all the facts. I'm very, very sorry for your loss of Ben. We've had 2 suicides in our family, young men in their 20s, and it's a wound that will not heal. Their parents walk around daily with a heart-wrenching loss. My thoughts and prayers are with you and your family. I'll make my story of the Blue Orb quick. I was 52 when this happened and lived in Arkansas. It happened 3 years ago. I had to take some items to a girlfriend who was at her daughter's home. We were standing in the living room talking. Shades were drawn and no direct light source. We were in front of the empty fireplace facing each other discussing something. Out of the corner of my left eye, I see a blue orb come out of the rock on the fireplace. It slowly drifted and went between us, passing exactly in the middle of us. Then it disappeared, just gone. But time seemed to have stood still, and we both just paused our beings for a moment. Normally, I'm an attentive listener, making great eye contact, but my eyes followed the orb. When it disappeared, my head turned back to face my friend, and I must have had a strange look because she looked at me and said, I saw it too. Weirdly, we just returned to our conversation like nothing abnormal just happened. The strangeness continued, though. When I left my friend's home, I had to go to my granddaughter's birthday party about 20 miles away in Mountainburg, Arkansas. When I got into my car, a strong thought entered my mind. Go to Lake Fort Smith and I will reveal myself. I didn't know who was going to reveal themselves or why, but it was a strong and persistent thought in my mind. But I fought that strange impression and went to the party. After the party, the thought was strong again, an intense urge. So I went. I know, such a dumb thing to do. When I got to the lake, it was beautiful, quiet, a gorgeous fall Saturday in October. I got out of my car. Okay, stop right there. You gotta be the critical thinker. If you're gonna do something like this, you gotta tell somebody what you're doing. Hey, I'm going to the lake. If you don't hear from me in an hour, this is where I am. Come and look for me. Blah blah blah. Going when your mind tells you to do something to an area you really wouldn't never go to, and then start getting out of the car in a rural area, don't do that. I got out of my car and walked to the footbridge. Nothing. A beautiful park, woods, water, and not far from Devil's Den as the crow flies. Stop. Devil's Den is a park I've written about in Arkansas. It has a lot of strange events associated with it. I wrote a book, The Devil's in the Detail. I'm going to talk about it later. That word devil is associated for a meaning for an area for some reason. As I turn to leave, and on the shore, I see a man standing looking like he's fishing. No tackle box, not really where most fishermen would try to cast. The mental conversation I started again, I tried to leave with, I hear, come here. I stared. I started walking off the bridge, noticing I could see the man's form, but not his face. I should have been able to make out more features. I became apprehensive and went back to the road, got back in my car, and a swarm of black and blue butterflies were all around the door of my car. I get in leaving, but driving by where the man was, but he was gone. This was just seconds to get in my car. I drive to the other parking lot, no vehicle. I drive through the campsites, they're empty. Not sure how he would have left without seeing me. He would have had to have been on foot. It was the strangest Saturday of my life. I even acted strangely by going to the lake. The whole Blue Orb thing was strange. My friend's reaction was strange. The lake incident was strange. My husband came home that evening from a fishing tournament, and I told him what happened. He's also an avid outdoorsman and one of the most logical thinking people I know. He was livid that I responded by going to the lake. Good job, husband. Nothing did happen that day, but it is in the back of my head wondering what was that blue orb? Why did it appear? And why it was drawing me to water out of my normal routine? What was all that stuff about? I found a picture of a blue orb on the internet, and that kind of reminded me of the blue orb I saw. I will say it was a very vibrant blue, maybe even a turquoise shade. It shimmered. I have no answer still to this day, but I listen to your channel knowing I'm not alone in dealing with these things I can't explain. With your hard work creating a community of critical thinkers, maybe one day soon we'll be closer to the truths that we deserve to know. Keep up the great work. Thanks. The number of people I know that have seen orbs is tremendous. A lot of times they're described as a basketball that has moving plasma inside. I've heard of white, orange, blue, green, many different colors, totally an unknown number of different sizes. Probably the biggest I've seen is like a medicine ball size. I've told you before that I talked to a pilot that had an orb next to the co-pilot's window that followed him out when they were leaving Monterey Airport in a private jet. All different walks of life, all different locations. Very interesting. Next question. Have you ever had a premonition? I've read you stories in the past where people had a dream of where a body was located. That dream turned out to be correct. Where do those dreams come from? Premonition. Have you ever had something come into your mind that something was going to happen to you in the near future? And it freaked you out? Did you go and do it anyhow? Let's listen to this. Well, Mr. Paulides, long-time listener, first-time writer. This might have some length to it, so I'll cut straight to the good stuff. My story involves an accident I had a few months back when I hit a deer early one morning on my way to work. I live in rural northeast Pennsylvania, so seeing a deer run across the road is nothing new or out of the ordinary. However, after many close calls and a few dented fenders, this is the first time I've ever totaled a car, a Lincoln Navigator, from hitting a deer. I have a good 50-minute commute each way to work 6 days a week that consists of mostly backcountry roads through farms and woodlands. What separates this accident from all other deer encounters I've had driving over the past 30 years, other than I totaled that vehicle, was the fact that I knew it was coming. I know I can be a paranoid person at times, but this takes the cake. For about 3 weeks or so leading up to the accident, I just had this feeling that something is going to get me. On this one particular stretch of road, it's about a 3-mile distance of winding backcountry road with few houses. The road crosses a covered bridge and then follows a creek on one side with farmland and wooded hills alternating on the other. But for weeks, this feeling of dread grew inside me as I drove this stretch of road every day. And it's not like I haven't had close calls with deer on this place before. The feeling got so intense that without even realizing what I was doing, I started talking to myself whenever I was on the road. My wife brought it to my attention one afternoon when she asked me, "Who's not going to get you?" I told her I didn't know, but I had the feeling that something was going to happen to me on this road, and soon. I guess I wasn't using my inside voice and was repeating, "You're not going to get me today," over and over as I drove. Normally, this is the kind of road with sights and views you see on a postcard. The nature that surrounds you as you're driving is beautiful year-round, and the twists, turns, and hills actually make it really a fun road to drive. But I had been on the edge for almost a month at this point. I mean, my head was on a swivel from the time I crossed the bridge till I exited the canopy of trees and turned at the end of the road. And then it happened. One Friday morning, I was driving to work, and I happened to have my son with me. The speed limit is 40 miles per hour, and I knew not to press my luck with speed, even before my little bout of paranoia. In fact, you can tell the who's local and who's from out of town just by the way they drive this road. You live, you learn. It was at about the halfway point on this road where the collision occurred. There's a blind corner that dips slightly before curving up and around a hill to what would have been to my left. Just as I was about to get back on the gas to climb the hill, I noticed the deer. It came shooting out from under some bushes on our right like it was shot out of a cannon. It also had its head down and seems to be at full sprint. I was able to drive up and around a bend a few hundred feet and park off the road and wait for the tow truck. Sadly, the deer didn't make it. I'll never forget the sound it made and continued to make until after we left the scene. I was unable to get the suffering deer or even see it due to the blind curve and hill. About a dozen vehicles must have locked up their brakes in an attempt to avoid the downed deer. My smashed and smoking vehicle and flailing arms weren't enough to get everyone's attention or even to get them to slow down. But the whole time I was out of the vehicle waiting for the tow truck, I felt as though I was being watched. My son wanted to get out of the car, but I would not let him. It just didn't seem safe because it wasn't, and I've watched too many of your videos to allow it. That would be paranoid parent in me coming out. But the feeling of something going to get me didn't lift until the tow truck showed up at about 45 minutes later. If I didn't know the deer was left in the road, I wouldn't have even been outside the vehicle at that point. And I only knew it was still in the road because the first vehicle to come by was a tractor trailer, and the sound of those tires locking up is quite loud. This all happened back in June, and I still drive the same route to and from work 6 days a week. I've seen plenty of deer across the road right in front of me since. But I've had no feelings of dread or anything close to how I was feeling before hitting the poor deer. If you or anyone has actually taken the time to read this, thank you. I hope this makes some kind of sense because there is a story in there. It's probably nothing, but to me it definitely felt like something I never care to feel or experience again. Heard similar stories. I don't know what that is. Are you getting a warning from a friendly angel? Are you getting a sixth sense advisory? Good question. But even if he heeded that inner voice, if that's the only way you can really take to and from work, it's probably the way you have to go. Sadly. And eventually, something will happen. Now, the first story I'm going to tell you, I got to say, When I was researching it, I was really sad. And you'll see why. This girl's name was Gertrude Harrington, 11 years old. And she lived in a little city called Belt, B-E-L-T, Montana. And that's about 15 miles southeast of Great Falls. It's out in the plains. It's a pretty area. And on a good day, you can see the Continental Divide, the Rockies. Well, Gertrude was born with physical deformities. She couldn't walk very fast. She had bad knees. And she had the mental capacity of a very young child, even though she was 11 years old. Gertrude, her mom, and her stepmom moved to Belt about 4 years prior to this incident happening. And this happened on June 8th, 1900. So Gertrude it was obvious she wasn't loved by her mom. Her mom and her stepmom had separated. And her mom didn't put any restrictions on Gertrude at all. Some nights she didn't come home. She'd be seen wandering the city. And the people of Belt knew the situation and were very comforting to Gertrude and treated her very well. And there, I think, is the difference between a small city in the Midwest or in the North and the big city. In the big city, you might become a victim. And here, there's compassion and empathy. And the town showed it. There was a teacher in their one-room schoolhouse that took a liking to Gertrude and invited her to come to class, something she'd never done before. And Gertrude came for a while. And when you read the story, I can almost see how Gertrude was probably embarrassed to go to class. Tattered clothes, filthy environment. Wasn't taken care of while other kids were. But her and this one teacher grew to care about each other a lot. And Gertrude always came by to see her. And this one morning, well, on June 7th, it was a rare night. Gertrude spent the night at her mom's house. There was no explanation for it. But the next morning she got up early and she was wearing just a tattered dress. No shoes, no stocking, no sweater. And she left. And she went over to the schoolhouse. And she told the teacher that she was going to go get her wildflowers and she'd be back. Well, Gertrude left and was never seen again. Now, if you stop there and you hear that story, you think, well, whatever. But the number of times I've written about young children that went out and picked wildflowers that disappeared is unbelievable how often that resonates. Couldn't believe it. Well, 2 days after Gertrude spoke to the teacher, and without anyone seeing the girl, her mom goes to the sheriff and reports her as missing. The sheriff blew his lid. He brought in her and her ex-husband and kept them in jail and monitored what they were saying because he thought they'd killed her. There was some evidence in the past that Gertrude was probably abused by the mom. People have seen her exhibit violent tendencies toward the girl. So the community was irate. But they came together for Gertrude, and there was a massive search. Farms, ranches, creeks, rivers. There's a little creek that runs through near the middle of town called Belt Creek. And at times it was waist deep, and at times it was ankle deep, depending on the area. And the townspeople walked shoulder to shoulder through the creek for miles looking for her. They had ranchers okay that they looked through barns and silos, and they looked everywhere. And on about June 15th, the main newspaper in Grand Forks, the main newspaper for the Plains ran a giant article about Gertrude. And in the article, it said that we as a community can't allow this to occur. And for the first time in history, a newspaper put up a reward for a little girl. This had never been done before. They put up $100 in 1900. That was a lot of money. And this put more people out into the land looking. July 19th, at about 2 p.m., there was a frenzy around downtown Belt, and 2 men and a little boy came in and said that they think they found Gertrude. And they took him out to an area about 2 miles outside of town on Belt Creek. And the creek has this big turn in it. And there was a tree down. And inside the branches of the tree, it looks like she got caught, was Gertrude. So they called the closest thing they had to a physician, which wasn't a physician. And they came down and they looked, and they said that her body was badly decomposed. Her feet were so bad that they looked mummified. And there was one mark in her head that they thought was caused by maggots. And the way that this person described the death was, there was no evidence of anything other than drowning. But there was no evidence of drowning. And they said, we think she drowned. But there's no other cause of death. So they didn't know. She was found face down in the water, which is also odd. Young girls, women are mostly found face up. Men are found face down. Very odd. But the thoroughness of the town search, coupled with the surrounding facts of her death, made this case profound in my world. She had a genetic deficiency in her DNA that caused her to have a disability. They said that she had the mental mind of a young child for 11 years old, and also had physical deformity. She's found in water. She's found face up. They don't know the cause of death. But the bigger thing to me, and the thing that just crushed my heart, was that we as a world could treat somebody in that condition so horrifically. My mind immediately went to the winter months in Montana. I don't know where Gertrude stayed, but she couldn't have been outside like she was in June. And the summaries of the articles about Gertrude talked about her mom and her stepfather at the inquest. Charges were later dropped against them because the person doing the autopsy said that there was no violence to the body. I don't know. Nowadays, I was a policeman and I found a parent treating a child like that in that manner, I guarantee I'd haul them in. And I'd have Child Protective Services get involved, and that would end. It's disgusting. But yeah, that's the first story for today. And there were no pictures of Gertrude, but I wanted to show you the headlines. No trace of missing child. This is after weeks of searching. Gertrude Harrington, who disappeared from Belt a week ago, cannot be found. Thorough search fails to reveal a single clue of the child's whereabouts. Lost in the hills, the mysterious disappearance of little girl in belt. These were the headlines that went on for weeks. Very sad. I hope Gertrude's in a better place. Next story about a good man. Todd Hofflander, 39 years old. Missing September 27th, 2010, in the Seven Devils area west of Riggins, Idaho. Now, again, I'll say this. Geographical locations get their names for a reason. Why? Most of the times you never know. But would you want to live in a housing tract called Seven Devils? Or Purgatory Drive? Or Hell's Lane? I don't think so. We have associations with that as a society. But there's many places out there in the world, in North America, that have these names. And an abnormal number of missing people end up going missing there. Todd went missing in one of these areas, Seven Devils. He went hunting with a friend, and he brought one of his black labs, a dog named Ruby. So this is Todd, good soul. It's a picture of him out in the wilderness with his labs. Well, Ruby was said to be his best friend. His wife said he and the dog were inseparable. Remember that. So Todd and his friend are hunting, and Todd says that his knee starts to hurt. So he tells his buddy that he's going to walk down towards camp and he'll meet him there. Friend says, okay. And Todd said he was going to move downhill, possibly towards the river. That's the Snake River. So his buddy goes down to where their boat was, near the Snake River. Todd's not there. He looks for him for a bunch of hours until it gets dark, then goes and reports it to the sheriff. The sheriff comes out, and the sheriff's office and the U.S. Forest Service search for Todd for 15 days. They don't find anything. And that's odd. Very odd. Well, Ruby was found, the dog, on the eastern slope of the mountains about a week and a half after Todd went missing. And that had people concerned. Because even the worst case scenario, they didn't think Ruby would ever leave Todd. That is odd. Because I've had many incidents where somebody with their dog, they died, the dog stayed with them until the searchers came. They wouldn't leave. Loyalty. So they were in the Hell's Canyon wilderness area. Todd was married, had 2 kids. Well, nothing happened on this case for 10 years. That's a long time. He was still missing until, I'll show you a map. Hunters were fishing or were hunting along the Snake River. The Snake River in this area separates Idaho from Oregon. Idaho and Oregon. So this is one of the main campgrounds that people use when they're going to go up into this area. Hunters coming in by boat are going to hunt up, and this is the mountain range. Amazing thing to me, and I don't get it at all, is Todd was supposed to be on this side by the river. And what happened was hunters came in and parked their boat near Bernard Creek. And then they started to move up to hunt. And they came across a backpack, some supplies, and some remains. As I've stated 100 times before, backpacks essentially never go away in our lifetime. They'll be there 30 years from now. And Todd's remains were found. The way they were identified is through DNA, and the FBI did the analysis on it at the request of the local sheriff. They never could determine the cause of death. But a subset of the missing that I've identified many, many times is hunting. And again, you have that point of separation where two hunters decide to separate and be alone, and something happens. And then you have the fact that Todd was with Kane, a dog. And for some reason, a lot of people disappear with dogs. And then the other big one is Todd had an injury that made him separate himself. Injury or illness that makes you separate from somebody else. And then he's found and they can't determine the cause of death. And he's not found in a time frame that is reasonable. 10 years? Considering how heavily hunted this area is, it's strange. Coupled with the fact that this area had probably been searched dozens of times, I don't know how they missed him. So that's Todd Hofflander, September 27, 2010, he disappeared. He was found in 2020. The next case I know super well. And another case that just tears at my heart. Years ago, right after I moved to Colorado, I went to a place up the Poudre Canyon, which is just west of Fort Collins, Colorado. And the Poudre River flows into the Poudre Canyon. And right after you get into the canyon, there's a place called Gray Rock Mountain. Gray Rock Mountain is a giant piece of granite that looks unusual when you see it. But this is also about the time I learned about the Gertrude Harrington case up the Poudre Canyon. And this case I'm going to tell you about today is a short distance from the Harrington case with almost identical circumstances. In both instances, young kids were with other young kids and adults on a trail. They get separated, they disappear. Very strange. In this incident, Chris Vigil, V-I-G-I-L, 9 years old. He went missing April 30th, 1978 in the Cache La Poudre Valley. And the distance between the Gertrude Harrington incident and this incident is about 25 air miles. At about 2 p.m. on April 30th, Marion Vigil, the mom, took her 4-year-old and 9-year-old son Chris for a hike up to Gray Rock Mountain. Now, when I did this hike, it was brutal. I was fresh in Colorado from California. This place is about 7,000 feet when you start hiking, and then it's a straight up series of switchbacks that are just brutal. I got to the top, I saw Gray Rock Mountain, and I was stunned. Stunned. But on this day, about 2 p.m., they start hiking. Well, Chris ran track at his school. He was in super good shape, and he gets way ahead of his mom and his brother. And he gets near the top, and he starts looking around, and he finds a man, last name is Chupan. And he and the man start talking. And the man's concerned because Chris is walking around out in the middle of nowhere and asks him, where are you going? And Chris goes, I want to go to the mountain. So they start heading that direction, and they come across 2 young girls. They're eating their lunch. And by this time, Chris got separated from Chupan again. That's his last name. And his name was Alan Chupan. And Chris asked the girls, hey, have you seen the man? And they said, yeah, he's up ahead a little bit. It's really unclear in all the reports how Alan and Chris got separated, but they did. And Chris went around the backside of the mountain, was the last time anyone saw him. Well, Marion and the other son got really tired, and I can understand why. It's a brutal hike. So she decides to go back down the mountain and just wait for Chris. She doesn't even know where her son is. Well, down the mountain comes Alan and these two women, young girls. And they say, no, we saw Chris up there, but we lost sight of him. We saw him, we lost sight of him. So they call the sheriff. At about 6:38 p.m., the first deputy arrives on scene, Larimer County, and immediately calls for a helicopter. And within an hour, the helicopter's arriving as horrific winds and rain and fog are moving into the area. It's so bad that the helicopter can't even start a search, and it retreats back to the airport. So the deputy calls for search and rescue and more assistance. And as they start to arrive, wind, rain, and then snow starts to fall like there's no tomorrow. So part of this, I got to meet the fire chief from that area that responded with volunteer firemen to search. And he said it was one of the strangest things he had ever seen. For being the end of April, a horrific storm out of nowhere comes up and just dumps a huge amount of snow on the area. So this is Chris, Vigil, young boy. So the ground teams get there that first night, and they couldn't go up because it was storming too hard. In 2 days, 12 inches of snow hit the ground. 2 helicopters were dispatched during that time. They couldn't even get close to the mountain. Then during the following 5 days, 45 inches of snow fell. Search and rescue knew the hazards. They had to go up, and they did go up, and a couple people got seriously injured, and they terminated the search. On May 13th, the deputies asked Shupan to come to the scene and show him where he'd last seen and explain everything. He did. He was very cooperative. On May 15th, the official search for Chris Vigil was terminated. The girls were interviewed and asked what they knew about the incident. And I got the official copies of the report. It's stunning. It's stunning. The girls said that they were at the top of the trail, looking at the base of the mountain. And they heard a strange type of scream come from the backside of the mountain that scared the heck out of them. And they said it was so scary that they didn't even want to have anything to do with it. Very weird. Now, the Vigils made several statements to the press that they were disgusted with the sheriff's office and their level of searching. I get that. I also am not an idiot. That the circumstances surrounding Chris Vigil's disappearance are troubling, to say the least. The storm was so difficult that you were putting searchers' lives in peril by going in. I don't know what the right answer is. You couldn't get people up to the top of the mountain by helicopter because the storm was too bad. You couldn't get people to the top of the trail because the trail was so dangerous. I don't know how to get in there. I wouldn't know what to do either. Maybe having a massive search in late May after the snow had left would have been part of the answer. I don't know. But Chris disappeared on April 30th of 78. Jared Adodero disappeared October 7th, 99, 21 years later. I've stated this many times as well, that you separate incidents by 20 years or more. People retire, people's memories cease. The reporters for a newspaper move on, don't remember what happened in years past. They don't put the dots together. And that, I believe, happened in these two incidents. These are both very unusual circumstances. So this is Fort Collins, Colorado over here. This is the city of LaPorte. This is the road through the Poudre Valley, Highway 14. And this is Gray Rock Mountain. And what you do is you park over here next to the highway, you cross the river on a small wooden bridge, and then you do a series of switchbacks up to the top of the mountain. Now, it's about 20 miles between there and the Big South Trail where Jared disappeared. Now, you can go watch Missing 411, my first documentary, and it's on YouTube Movies. You can watch it for free. I think it's also on Hulu for free. And you can read about Jared's case because we highlighted it in a big way in this movie. Now, that is Gray Rock Mountain. It sits out there like nothing you will ever forget. It is just one solid piece of granite all the way around. Boulders everywhere around it. It's a stunning piece when you crest the trail over here and you're looking at it. Now, we walked all the way around to this side. There's a nice meadow in here, which is kind of odd in some ways because it doesn't match the rest of the rocky landscape. But when you look at it, you just can't believe it's sitting there. It doesn't match anything else. It's very, very odd. Now, in Jared's case, I'm not telling you anything that isn't true, but he was found about 4 years later. Just a small amount of remains were found 4 years later, far up above the trail where he disappeared. Alan, Jared's dad, and I are good friends. Every time we get together, we talk about his son. And the case troubles me a lot. It's always troubled me. The sheriff for Larimer County said at the time that mountain lions killed Jared. Complete garbage. Didn't happen. Alan is a very smart man. They found Jared's Jared's sweatshirt, and he submitted those to, I think, 3 or 4 different mountain lion experts and wanted an opinion. There was no blood on the shirt, no blood on the pants. And the experts said a mountain lion. Independently, they didn't know each other. They didn't know they were each giving an opinion. Each of them said that a mountain lion did not kill Jared. Flat out. There's that old statement I use, local reports for local consumption. I think the sheriff in Larimer County knew the world was watching this incident. He had to come up with a story that would soothe everyone's concerns, and that was the story. I've never believed it. I was convinced after hearing Alan tell me about it and reading the reports he had. It isn't what happened. I don't know if we'll ever know the truth, but watch the movie and make your own decision. So there's the 3 cases. Chris Vigil, he was 9 years old, disappeared April 30th, 1978. Gertrude Harrington, 11 years old, from Belt, Montana, disappeared June 8th, 1900. And Todd Hofflander, missing September 27th, 2010, from the area of the Snake River and Bernard Creek in the Hells Canyon wilderness. And I hope everybody can absorb what I've been telling you about these cases. Understand that these are lives that we're talking about. Young children, men, and families. And when you see a policeman, understand that his job is tough, and he's there to protect you and your family and to be a service to the community. And that's what I lived for when I was a police officer. They're not all bad people. Thanks for watching. Give the video a thumbs up. In the comments section below, you'll be able to see all the contact points, our video page. Have almost 160 videos at this point, and our websites. And you can follow me at David Paulides at canammissing on Twitter. Our website is canammissing.com. Thanks for your support. If you don't subscribe, please subscribe. We'd appreciate it. Thanks, Village. Bye.